Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, the place to be for honest and real talk about relationships and sex. Whether you're a man or woman, single or a couple, this is the show for you. I am your host, Kevin Anthony, and I am here to help you have the relationship of your dreams and the best sex of your life. All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 378, and it is titled Zeke and Terri Share How They Went from Divorcing to Rebooting Their Marriage. So in this episode, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to have guests on, obviously, Zeke and Terri, who I'll introduce in a moment. They're going to share their story about life, how they got together, how they did relationship, where they got off track, what the point they got to where they were like, I think it's time to call this over. And then how they got it back on track and are still together today. So I would like you listeners to get from this. I want you to see, the places where you go, oh, wow, I'm doing something similar to that, or we're in a similar place, or that's how I got to where we are. And I also want you to realize that there is hope. And I think throughout the course of this episode, you'll start to get that. You'll see where they were at. You'll see where they're at now. And I think it'll be a great tale on how you can really change things, no matter how far gone it may seem. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Of course, as always, before we get started, a few words from my sponsor. Ladies, did you know that the overwhelming majority of men consider receiving oral sex a must in their relationship? Well, of course you did, because men have been asking you for it your whole life. But do you feel confident in your ability to give great oral sex? If you tend to avoid it because you don't feel like you're good at it, or if you feel that you are pretty good at it but want to get even better, then my new Blowjob Mastery course is for you. I've teamed up with the amazing coach Reed Wong of Eternal Love to bring you a practical and easy to follow course that is guaranteed to increase your confidence and skill when giving oral sex to your man. In this course, you will get all the secrets to mastering the art of oral sex with step-by-step instructions and multiple live demos. Go to sacredfemininearts.com/BJ Mastery. That's sacredfemininearts.com/BJ Mastery. I've been teaching about sex for a long time. I never, ever did I ever think I would create an online course about blowjobs, but I did this viral video on YouTube, and I didn't know it was going to go viral. I just happened to put out a video on it because somebody asked, and it went kind of viral, and the response from women was really overwhelming, and it really showed me that women were craving this knowledge. So I created it. So far, it's been going great. I really appreciate the support. And then, of course, also my Power and Mastery series, which I've had out for quite a few years now, and I've continued to rework and make better as the years go on. Power and Mastery 3.0 is the latest version of the popular men's sexual mastery course. If you're struggling with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, or simply want to increase your skills in the bedroom, then Power and Mastery is for you. Join the exclusive club of men who have taken their sexual performance into their own hands and become sexual masters. Mastering your sexuality is a key component to becoming the man she has always dreamt of and craves. Don't leave your sexual performance up to chance or the throw of the dice. Become a sexual master today by going to powerandmastery.com/sexual-mastery. That's powerandmastery.com/sexual-mastery. Since I started reading the ads for the Blowjob Mastery course, sometimes women are like, why is it always about us? Why do we always have to increase our skills? And I said, oh, no, ladies. I've been teaching men for 15 years how to show up for you in the bedroom the way you really want them to. So that is Power and Mastery, the courses. Oh, one last thing I want to share with you. I've been sharing. I got t-shirts, by the way. Also, check this out. More orgasms, less wars. We got the women's version. We got the men's version. You can find those on my website also. Just a fun little project I did. That quote actually came from a guest that I had on this show. And I said, oh my God, that's great. I'm going to make that a t-shirt. All right. My guests today are Zeke and Terri Mead. And they are midlife empty nesters, proving that some of life's best adventures begin after 50. After nearly 25 years of marriage, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, they decided to get divorced. But then they didn't. They accidentally rebooted their relationship and embarked on a new set of adventures, embracing their differences and challenging themselves to grow individually and as a couple on a daily basis. While they couldn't be more different, they have a long history, a solid foundation, and a steadfast commitment to making their relationship and new business work as they travel and explore the world. Through authentic storytelling and honest experiences, they inspire couples to embrace midlife adventures and the ongoing work of building stronger relationships. Welcome to the show, Zeke and Terri.
Thanks for having us.
Can we go back to the blowjob class?
Of course we can.
Wow, that's how we're going to start this, huh?
Well, I wanted to catch everybody's attention. So,
well, like I said, I like to provide something for everybody. I never want either side to feel like the responsibility of showing up in the bedroom is just theirs. It is a co-creation, as always.
And otherwise, we
have two of those already. So.
Otherwise, it's a solo adventure.
That's right. All right. So we got a story that we need to tell here. And your story starts way, way back. And so that's where I really want to start, way back in the beginning. You told me in the pre-interview that you've known each other since you were 10. Tell the audience a little bit about your background and how did you end up getting together?
Sure. So usually Terri starts this off, and I just want to clarify the point there. I knew Terri when we were 10. I don't think Terri saw me anywhere in the world. Maybe when we were 12 or 13 and we got to junior high. But at 10, we went to different elementary schools in the same little town over in the East Bay here in the Bay Area. And once a month, the old GATE program, Gifted and Talented, and I think I must have somehow
cheated your way
in that test because that's not part of my skill set at all. But they picked a couple kids from each school and we'd all go do, I remember whale watching or whale, there was some
computer programming.
Yeah, so there was something that once a month they'd bring all the kids together, and that's where I saw her.
And my identical twin sister.
And your identical twin sister. Do I know which one I saw then, now? No, but I figured it out. Terri probably didn't know me from anything until 2 years later when we were at the same middle school, and then we got to become...
Is this where I get to pick up on the story? Yeah, because usually I interrupt and correct it, but you are 100% right. So yes, we met when we were 10. We ended up going to the same junior high, and I remember we met in 7th or 8th grade, and we're going to give you the TLDR on this story because we are now 55, so 45 years is a lot of years to go through. But we went together for about 6 weeks in middle school, junior high, and I dumped him after six weeks. Now, I remember us kissing for the first time in a particular place on campus, and he remembers a different place. And you always say that, who are you going to believe?
Right. So if you have someone with a data set of one versus someone with a data set of more than one, who are you going to believe who knows what that data set is? So I have the one data set.
Okay, so maybe I misremembered, or could be mixing you up with somebody else. Then we went to high school together, and we were really good friends through high school. He went off to Chico State. I went to Fresno State, and my twin sister actually went to Chico State as well. So I think there was one time when I was visiting, we might have seen each other, but nothing happened. But when we were 20, his parents threw their annual Christmas party back in the Bay Area, and I went to it, and we hooked up again. And we were together for a very short period of time. The story's better if I say that I dumped him, but I was back in the Bay Area. He was up in Chico, and long distance just didn't work. He was a starving college student. I was already working and going to school, and it just didn't work out. So we continued to be friends. Fast forward to the time we were 24. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and he saw his opportunity and decided to swoop in, try to woo me with beach trips and erotic poetry on my voicemail, but I just wasn't really ready for another relationship. I'd been in a relationship with someone 10 years older, thought it was going someplace, and I just wanted to play. So I dumped him again. So that's 3 times, but who's counting? It's not over yet. So then when I was 25, I threw myself a birthday party and invited Zeke because we were friends. And we just happened to have a weekend off to go skiing. So we went skiing with some friends. Everybody else left. We're at the cabin, drank a little bit of wine, maybe a lot of wine, sat in front of the fire. And we both just said, let's do this one more time. And either our friendship is over because we can't keep doing this. We've been doing this for too long, or we're going to get married. And 14 months later, we were married.
The reason I really wanted to start there is because I wanted people to see, when two people get together and there are a ton of differences and it seems like it's not working out, sometimes there's the assumption that, well, you guys didn't get to know each other enough beforehand, or because you'll hear that. Well, you rushed into it, and then you didn't take the time. And so I just, knowing a little bit about your story from the beginning, when we talked the first time, I wanted people to see that you knew each other for a long time. You had a lot of opportunities to get to know who you were. And I think that's relevant to the story as it goes on. So, okay, now you're married. How long were you married before you decided to have children?
We got married at 26, and looking back at that, by the way, anyone I see getting married around that time, I'm like, you don't know who you are. It is so incredibly young. We had so much stuff coming into it, but our first child was born when we were 31 and our second one at 34. It did take us a year to get pregnant. We started looking into some fertility stuff, running some tests, and then magically we know how it happened, but then all of a sudden I found out I was pregnant. That was really a fun experience. We were canoeing out in the middle of nowhere and camping, no bathrooms, and I was having to get up and pee in the middle of the night, and beer didn't taste good. I'm like, something's wrong. So I took a pregnancy test and found out that I was pregnant. But when I think that was.
Yeah, and back to your comment, I would say our experience is that we may have known each other fairly well, but we didn't really know ourselves. And so how we're going to move forward with that and how that works with somebody else, it didn't matter how long we knew each other.
And that showed up in problems that we'll end up talking about, that manifested itself in us declaring divorce at one point. But yeah, so 5 years after, but we got the dog, we bought our house in San Francisco, then we had the kid, and then we moved down the peninsula, and then we had kid number 2. I mean, we followed the historical prescribed traditional steps that we don't buy into anymore.
Well, but that's partly why I'm asking, of course, that question is because, again, there's one of the things that tends to happen is, people meet each other, the chemicals are flowing, everything's great, they rush into getting married, they're not even married a year before they have kids, right? And so things happen really quickly, and then they start to figure out who each other is, and then they go, oh crap, this isn't working, right? And I just kind of I want people to basically resonate with your story, because your story is so typical, right? Like you said, you followed the prescribed way, the sort of American dream that they tell you, you get married young, you get the house, you get the white picket fence, a couple of years later come the kids, the dog, the whole thing. And you guys did all of that. And yet still there were significant challenges, which we'll get into in just a moment.
And just to take a step back, there were challenges along the way. It's not like it was all roses and perfume up until after kids and we were in COVID. So
our first year of marriage was incredibly hard, and we saw a therapist after the first year. We were just talking about it. It's like the problems that even we have today really showed manifested in that first year. And the therapist that we went to was so incredibly bad that we were like, ooh, we're not going down that road again for a very long time. And we're like, we will figure this out. But all of our garbage showed up in that very first year, and we didn't address it. The other thing in following, yes, it did look like the traditional steps, but Zeke was in software sales when we got our banking and software sales. And then he became a police officer, which completely upset the apple cart, because I didn't really expect to be married to someone who had shift work, 4 days on, 4 days off, 5 days on, 3 days off, back to back fives, um, mandatory overtime, court appearances, all of that stuff completely disrupted what I thought was going to be our flow, especially since we'd agreed when we got married that I was going to be the one who was going to work because I had greater earning potential, and he was going to be the one to stay home with the kids. So while it looked on paper like we were setting ourselves up for success and we were following the prescribed way, a couple of things happened within the first 5 years that really disrupted that we never adequately addressed.
Yeah. And, and that's the thing, right? Is life is going to throw disrupting things at you. I mean, it just always does. Like nobody escapes that, right? And so then the question is, how do you handle it? I'm curious, you said within the first year, some of this stuff came up and you did see that therapist, which was apparently not a very good one, which sort of dissuaded you from seeing therapists for a while. But the question that came to my mind when you shared that was, you made a conscious decision not to address that stuff in that moment. Like, what was going on there? Why did you make that decision? Like, you went to the therapist, you're like, oh, she's not very good and whatever. But then you just said, we'll just do it on our own. What kind of led to that decision?
Well, I think so I had seen good therapists before, and basically you go in and they kind of unpeel the wound, they do a little digging around and that is excavation, and then by the end of it, they kind of patch it over. And so you leave sore, but you leave complete. You leave without it being raw and exposed. And I remember we went to the therapist and we were on our way up to Tahoe and we had stopped, and I basically cried almost the entire way as we were talking. And actually that terrible experience brought us together, because there's nothing better than having a common enemy to bring two people close together. At least it worked with my sister, not me and my sister. It worked with us. And so we were like, okay, we're going to figure this out. We're going to work this out, because obviously that didn't work. And so it wasn't a matter of, we weren't ignoring it, but we kind of felt resolute in that, okay, we will stand up, we will deal with this, and we will try to power our way through it. We were 27. We were so naive in thinking that we had any of the skills or resources to adequately address it.
Yeah, and that was kind of the point. Like I wanted people to hear, because I know so many people do the exact same thing. They see the early signs, right? They know that they're struggling, but they consciously choose not to get the help that they need, right? And so I was just curious, one, what your thought process was in that, and then two, just for people to hear, like that's often the route that most people go. A lot of times they'll just go, well, whatever, it'll just work itself out, or somehow we'll get through it. And they don't actually do a whole lot. Sounds like you guys actually became very resolute to try to solve it. The thing is that you tried to do it on your own without help. And as you pointed out, you were very young and naive and didn't, possess the skills to really be able to manage it on your own. And I think that's true for so many people. That's why it's so good for them to hear that, right? Because as we get further on in the story and you start talking about things that did help, right, it'll make more sense. In other words, what I really want people to hear is, if you find yourself in this situation, don't struggle with it on your own. Don't just sit there and say, well, we'll figure it out, especially if you're young like that, because trust me, none of us learn how to do this stuff when we're young. Right. And there is no shame in seeking help from qualified individuals to help you through these challenges in life.
And if the first therapist doesn't work, go find another one. I think that experience was so incredibly painful that I was like, going our own route has to be easier than doing that, because she was just so terrible. And we have been through a series of really bad therapists.
It's like anything else. There's a joke that I love to tell all the time, which is, what do you call the doctor who graduated last in medical school? The answer is doctor, right? Oh. In other words, there's a huge variation, right? In any field. It doesn't matter which one it is, right? So there's a lot of great therapists out there, but there's a lot of terrible ones out there too. So to your point, you're absolutely correct. Just like you would with a doctor. If you go to a doctor and you don't feel like you got a proper opinion, what do? You generally go find another doctor and get a second opinion, right? Same thing with your therapist, coach, whatever. Try them on, find one that works for you. That's a very important point. Okay. So all of these sort of stresses and things were happening in life that were taking you sort of down the road of disconnection. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit more. So you mentioned the fact that you had challenges from the beginning. You had kids within, the first 5 years of being married. Zeke's work changed, and shift work is very difficult. Being married to a policeman is also very stressful because you never know what's going to happen while he's out on the job. What other types of things, as you went on through the years, led to you feeling more disconnected as a couple?
Well, I think the next big one was when our youngest was about 3 and our oldest was he was going into first grade, and we were looking for a nanny. At that point, I had started my consulting firm in IT strategy and compliance, and he was still a police officer, and I was essentially a single parent. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I mean, he was getting out of the house at 4:30 in the morning in order to avoid getting held over so that he could pick up the kids by 5 o'clock, because I was getting the kids up and out and I wasn't getting to my client site until 9. And then at 4 o'clock, I would get a call. I arrested somebody. I've got to do the paperwork. Can you go pick up the kids? And so then I would have to then stop my day at 5, go pick up the kids, take them, out to dinner, take them home, bathe, read books, everything. And at 9 o'clock, I was getting back on the computer again to, finish my client work. And so in that time, not only were we not seeing each other, but I was getting incredibly resentful because I was essentially a single parent that I couldn't rely on him, and I was having to move things all around. So I think that created a lot of disconnect with his work hours and my consulting and managing the kids. That also created a chasm in terms of we were not intentional about working on having our own self-care, let alone investing in our relationship. We put the kids first, as a lot of Gen X parents do because of what we endured from our parents. And I think we swung way too far that direction. So that created a chasm. So Adam was going into first grade and we were sitting around and running the numbers and
on a napkin at a restaurant for dinner. That's, again, it falls right in line with we don't have enough time, energy, or whatever to cook dinner at home, so we're out at a restaurant again.
That was actually a date night. You and I were out. It was kind of one of our rare date nights, and kind of penciled out onto a napkin. It's like, well, I think I can make it work. And he's like, okay, I'll stay home with the kids. I'll continue to work, and that would open up more hours for more billable hours so that I could bump up and then cover. Because also, childcare is expensive. So that was a lot of it was going there. So, I mean, our quality of life with our kids, none of it was checking any of the boxes in terms of the life we wanted to live. So the next disconnect came when we did not sit down and explicitly define the roles of the stay-at-home parent versus the working parent. In a patriarchal society that we live in, and then also the way that I was conditioned, as a Gen Xer to have it all, be it all. I still carried a majority of the burden of the mental load, the social load. I managed all of our finances. I was then the primary breadwinner, the only breadwinner. And then he was with the kids and he had a lot of free time. And I was very resentful of his free time and him not taking advantage of it while I'm off busting my ass with zero. I mean, I was playing soccer on Sundays and that was my only free time. No girls' weekends, no girls' trips. I didn't spend a lot of time with friends. I mean, because I was like, I chose to have kids, therefore I need to spend time with my kids. And we spent time as a family. And so that created a big chasm. And I mean, how much further? I mean, are we at Grand Canyon? I mean, all these things adding up. And the one thing that we had was this foundation, and we had a commitment, a blind commitment.
Yeah. So let me pause you there for a moment because you said some things that I think are really important that we need to sort of backtrack on. One of them is this idea that you really put your kids ahead of everything. And this is something that, so we're all Gen Xers here. We can talk about this. This is something that really started with the Gen Xers and honestly has continued on with all of the younger generations as well. Now, when we were growing up, it was pretty much kids should be seen and not heard. Like, be quiet, as long as you're not poking an eye out or something like that, just don't bother us, kind of a thing. We were the latchkey kids, right? So most of us came home to an empty house after school, right? We had the key. We just let ourselves in, made ourselves lunch, right? There were some positives to that. We learned self-reliance. We are far more capable than any generation that has ever come after us. But there were some downsides to it as well, right? We didn't necessarily get the emotional care that we were seeking and needing. But the response to that is exactly what you said, which is when you decided to have kids, you said, I'm going to do it differently. And here's one of the biggest mistakes that I see all couples these days make. They put their kids as absolute number one priority over everything, to the detriment of the relationship. And the problem with that is the relationship is the container that creates the space for raising healthy children. And when the container is not maintained and it falls apart and parents get divorced, the children suffer. So while parents think they're doing the right thing for their kids by always putting them first and always prioritizing them, in the end, they're actually hurting their kids because the relationship suffers. Even if they don't get divorced, the children are not modeled in the home what a loving, caring, healthy, successful relationship is. And so then they learn dysfunctional relating, and they probably, given the divorce rates that we have in this country, also ended up living in a broken home. So I just wanted to sort of point that out because it's a mistake that I see so many couples make. And I really wish people would see it from the point of view that, I'm not saying you have to do what our parents did, seen and not heard. What I'm simply saying is you need to find a balance. And there are times when you'll have to prioritize the relationship over the kids, just like there are times where you'll have to prioritize the kids over the relationship. But over time, it should roughly balance out as best as you can make it. So that's one point that you mentioned that I really wanted to read.
We are apologizing to our kids every day, it feels like. And we are, because they're pissed, because now they're seeing us modeling a good relationship. And they're like, where was that? Why are we not, why didn't we see that? And we're like, we are so sorry. And here's what we're doing differently. And we hope that now we can kind of fix, Band-Aid, provide the plaster or the duct tape, or MacGyver the situation so that you have something better moving forward. They're 21 and 24 at this time.
I coach a lot of people, and the majority of the issues that we deal with in any coaching session stem from childhood. This is true of any therapy session as well, from attachment styles to all that kind of stuff forms very early. And one of the things that you always have to get to when you're working with somebody about this is you have to get them to the point where they realize that their parents were just humans and were just doing the best that they could with the knowledge and skills and resources that they had at the time, right? So what I would say to your children, if I were speaking to them, is I would say, holding resentment over, oh, great, now you got a great relationship. But what about then? I would say, look, they were doing the best they could at the time, and nobody taught them. They had to figure it out on their own. And thankfully, hey, be grateful that they figured it out now. And not
I'm hoping their therapists tell them, because they're both in therapy.
I hope their therapist is telling them that also, because they should be. Anyway, I also am sharing that with you because, you don't have to spend the rest of your life apologizing.
Oh no, it's just become it's become a family joke. It isn't. Yes, there are moments of guilt, but it has just become a family joke, and it is actually emblematic of just really how healthy our relationships are with our kids as a result of admitting how human we are, admitting it was like, well, yeah, screwed that up. Sorry. What can I do to make this better? And, owning up to it and then being able to try to contribute to a solution, resolution, repair, rather than blame.
Can you give me a gift card to the blowjob class?
Wait, who do you want the blowjob from?
I'm just going to give it to them, and then they can do with it as they need.
I'll see what I can do for you.
Wait, that's not going to work with either of our kids.
It's what we can offer them, right?
How long have you been sitting on that one?
It's been about a minute and a half, yeah.
All right. So there were some other things that you shared that I thought were interesting too. One of which is you were sharing how, because you guys had a different work dynamic than most people, that was creating resentment, right? So you were feeling like you didn't get to do the girl type, outings and things like that. And you were busy all the time, and he had a lot more free time. And so, two things about that. One, that is common in both directions. So often men will feel that way too. Like, man, I'm over here busting my butt. And then the second I come home and she wants me to spend the whole weekend with the kids and blah, 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 blah. So you were just basically experiencing what a lot of men experience. Now, I'm not.
I would disagree because I know a lot of stay-at-home moms, and during the day they were arranging play dates, or they were, I mean, you were in the classroom, but or with other volunteer stuff, or they are super active and a lot more so. And Zeke was very good, and I'm saying he was very good about protecting his time so that he did not give all of that away. So yes, the power dynamic was a little bit different on that, but he was not doing as much as all of the stay-at-home moms that I knew were doing, who at the end of the day had worked just as hard as the guys who were coming home and going, but I've been at the office, you've been at home, the house is a mess, what the hell have you been doing all day long? So I think the
Right.
dynamics are a little different.
Right. And you didn't give me a chance to finish that thought. but,
Okay.
but so that is a lot of what men experience for sure. And then where I was going with that is it was more so in your case because of the natural tendencies of how men would do something versus how women
Yeah.
would do something,
Okay.
how men feel about something versus how women feel about something,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, for instance, in this case, what you were just pointing out with the other stay at home moms is women by nature are very, very nurturing. They will think of all those little details and they'll do all those little things, whereas men, not as much, right? We'll think more big picture things. The kids will be safe 100%. They'll be fed. They'll got clothes on their back, all of that kind of stuff. But we might not think as much about the little details, because that's just how we are as men. And so any couples that
I
are
think that's a socialization. I'm not sure it's nature. I think it's a nurture. It's not, I think it's a socialization in a patriarchal society
there
because
might be some of that.
I do believe that men, if socialized to care about things the way that we women tend to be socialized to care, I think that would be very, very different.
You could program some of that in, but there is no denying the fact that nature has programmed us, because if we get out of modern society and we go back to hunter gatherers, whose job was it to care for the kids? Women's. Whose job was it to go hunt, to build, to defend? It was the men's. The thing is, we always look at the way we operate in society based on our current society, right? And we say, well, because our society is like this, this, and this. But there is real science, it's called epigenetics, where we can see how things have gotten literally programmed into our DNA. And the thing is if we look at the entirety of human existence, and we say, if you're watching on the video, I'm holding my hands up. Let's say the entirety of human existence is this big. Our modern society is just this little piece over here. We have not completely overridden all of our DNA with just the last, few thousand years of, human development. So can we make different choices and different decisions? Yes, but there is definitely some hardwired programming that's running underneath the surface that make us different, that make us better suited for certain roles. So for instance, for men, we are generally the workers. We're like, whether we want to admit it or not, we are generally, the mule in the fields. Like we work hard. We work. And I'm not saying women don't work hard also. What I'm saying is we are just more naturally inclined to do 15 hours a day and not necessarily get resentful. So there are just little differences like that. And I just wanted people that are listening to understand that, let's say you do choose to do things reversed like you guys do. There's nothing wrong with that. But just know you're going to have to put extra attention on it. You're going to have to do things a little bit differently to make it work for both of you. Now, of course, there's also the idea that There are relationships that are reverse polarity. So men who are much more in their feminine, women who are more in their masculine. And in those types of roles, they tend to fit easier in that reversed role. But if you have a man who's more masculine, a woman who's more feminine, they'll struggle more to do those reverse roles. And so if they choose to do that, they'll need a little bit more work.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I completely agree with. I can't speak to the generational DNA and all that type of thing, but myself coming into this role, certainly loved my kids, wanted to do this for them, saw that my job as a police officer was getting in the way of pretty much everything, and I was happy to switch roles. I didn't know exactly the role I was switching into, and that's where part of that Terry was talking about was that we didn't sit down and identify, okay, this is how, this should work, or this is where I need you from her standpoint to me to fill the role that she needed filled for the kids.
And setting expectations. And I think taking a step back from the last thing you talked about, taking a step back and saying, anytime that you decide to have children or add something into a relationship, I think, well, even taking a step back, having a conversation about what you are expecting out of your marriage, why you're going into marriage. There's a book called The New I Do, which I wish I'd read before we got married, because there are like 8 different types of marriages or relationships you can go into and how to manage them, whether it's for companionship or finance or to have kids or, something else. Setting those expectations and having really quality conversations about that. And then when you decide to have kids, talking about that, setting expectations, who's taking on what roles and responsibilities, the duties of managing the container of the relationship, as well as the children and the self. And then, if you take a step further, when someone decides to stay home or somebody loses their job and stays home, conscious, intentional conversations about roles, responsibilities, expectations, and duties is really important, regardless of the gender makeup or the role in the relationship. I think that is something that I wish we had done very differently, but we were young. And when I talk to younger people in their 20s or 30s who are either, thinking about getting in a relationship, thinking about getting married, thinking about having kids, or in a relationship, I'm like, have the conversation so that you are understanding the expectation, the roles, and the responsibilities, and you have a sound playing ground set foundation, I guess is the word I'm looking for, a solid foundation, because some of those things, the fissures in the foundation, the cracks come up when you don't address it. You can't address everything, but if you at least have the foundation, it makes the other things easier to stay connected over.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And you need to have those conversations as best you can. They're harder to have when you're younger and you don't even realize you're supposed to have those conversations. But that's very similar to what I was trying to say is like, yes, you need to have those conversations. And I was also pointing out that in your case, those conversations were even more important because of the role reversal, right? That's the point I was trying to make, is that if anybody chooses to go that path, know that there's going to be additional challenges there that you may or may not be aware of. So we just want people to know that. We want people to know that, okay, we're going to go down this path. We need to set aside some time. We need to really hash this out. We really need to think about the realities of what this might look like, because lots of unexpected things are going to come up. Okay. There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about before we move into the solutions thing. And that is, this is relevant for multiple reasons. It's especially relevant in your case when it comes to how you got back on track. But I'm curious, during all of this stuff, especially when the divide was getting bigger, what was your sex life like?
Terrible. It was terrible. We were disconnected emotionally. Our timelines didn't always work together. We would go through periods where we might have good sex, but we just had challenges almost from the get-go. And the baggage that we brought in, the expectations. I came into the relationship very early on. I kind of took on a very male-centric mentality where if I wasn't, I mean, I decided this at 16. If I wasn't going to marry a guy and I wasn't having a lot of fun, I wasn't going to stay in the relationship. And I chose to have relationships purely for sex, just for fun. So when Zeke and I decided to get into the relationship at 25 and I was having to combine sex and love together, I did not do that successfully. I didn't see how I could successfully combine the two together. One was sheer pleasure, a tool, and the other was something that was a lot more emotional, and I didn't ever really combine those really well together. And on the performance side, we had some issues in terms of I was very orgasmic, but I needed him to last just a little bit longer. And so our timing didn't work out. It was before we knew about toys. It was before we were comfortable talking to each other, trying different things. Sometimes we would get super lucky and we would have orgasms at the same time. And other times it would be just kind of going through the effort. And then I would just take care of myself some other time on my own. So that did not contribute to a healthy relationship at all. That piece was really missing.
Was there a point in time where you guys stopped having sex, or did you continue throughout?
I think in our 40s.
It was pretty late. Going back to, again, this is knowing yourself, right? And so Terri seemed to know some things about herself and how she worked on that. I myself knew probably even less about myself. And so getting into a relationship was probably more of a lack of expectation or a lack of understanding of how much I participate in this relationship and can make different things work out, and how I communicate and how that works with the results, and how sex is an ingredient in that cocktail of success. So just to give a perspective as to Terri's consciousness of the situation and my more lack of consciousness. Yeah. But yes, sex became very infrequent.
Yeah, in our 40s. And I think when things started getting really shaky with us in my early 40s, I think I started the menopause transition completely unbeknownst to me. And it was only after researching for my book, Piloting Your Life, that I learned that when you start perimenopause, your body kind of goes through this this last hurrah, so you've got this increase in hormones. It's like, if you want to have a baby, this is your going out of business sale. This is your opportunity. So I think we had like a surge, and I was very sexually motivated. And so we had, I think, some decent sex, but that also created a problem, because I'm like, if I'm not having good sex here, I'm going to go look for it elsewhere. And so then that did not go over well. And that was when we were about 42, 43. And then after about a year, that dropped off. And I think, it wasn't good for a couple of years after that.
So basically you kind of struggled with sex throughout most of your relationship. And then at some point in the 40s, it was pretty much just not happening at all.
Yeah.
Right?
And it was very sporadic. Yeah.
Very, very typical. Again, I hear that story from so many couples over and over again, that this is sort of the pattern or the path that they follow. Now, in your case, I think it's even more relevant, because in just a moment, we're going to talk about how you actually got back on track. And it's interesting. It is a very different way than most people end up getting back on track. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. I'm way past actually when I was going to do the mid-show break. So let me just pause for a brief word. After this break, you'll hear the thing that accidentally rebooted their relationship. And when you do, you'll realize just how valuable this sponsor can be for both you and your relationship. Everybody, winter is coming, and so should you. Colder days are here to stay, so it's time to turn the heat up in the bedroom. Get access to Beducated and learn some real tips on how you can stay warm. We're talking with Zeke and Terri. We're talking about how their relationship got off track and then how they got back on track. And, obviously we're going to get into that in just a moment, but sex was such a key part to it. And making that sex better was a key part to it. And that is something that you can learn here on Beducated. You can learn how to build anticipation that will have your partner thinking about you all day. You can learn how to master techniques for next level orgasms. You can explore new territories together with confidence. You can do all of that and so much more. Beducated has over 150 courses on sex and intimacy. No matter how much you think you already know, no matter how good you think you already are, there's guaranteed to be something in there that will make your sex life and relationship better. And hey, it's not just getting colder, but the holidays are here as well, and you want to make your gifts count. So pass up the last minute impulse buys for an unforgettable experience. Treat yourself or loved one to one of the gifts of sexual happiness. Beducated is the present no material object could ever top. You know, some people are the I want to have material objects. Some people are the I just want to have experiences. I think life is best when you can have a bit of both. It's nice to have some material things, but it's also nice to have a lot of really amazing experiences. And Beducated can help you have those. So make this winter your hottest season yet. Sign up to Beducated and use the code LOVELAB to get 50% off the yearly pass locked in for life. There's also a 14-day money-back guarantee, so you do not have to worry about it. Try it out. See if there's stuff in there that you really like. I'm confident that once you get in there and you see the courses, that you will like it and you will keep it for sure. And if you don't know where to start, here are some courses for inspiration. How about Roadmap to Intimacy? Or Blowjob/Cunnilingus? Ecstatic Sex? Or Foreplay for Couples? I mean, that just scratches the surface. Like I mentioned before, there's over 150 courses in there. It actually can be a little bit overwhelming. Like, oh my God, there's so many things in here. Just use the search function. When you're looking for something, go type it in there. It'll pull up all the things that are relevant that you're looking for. So again, don't forget, sign up to Beducated today and remember to use the code LOVELAB to get 50% off the yearly pass locked in for life. That is a fantastic deal, and I am a big proponent of, hey, if you're buying gifts this Christmas season, buy the gifts you really want, not the ones that you think you should buy. So that brings me to how you guys got back on track. So you at this point, you know, the chasm is wide, it's deep, the sex isn't happening, you've decided to separate. So from that point, how did you all of a sudden decide not to separate? What made you decide to, you know, maybe give it another shot?
So in January of 2021, so middle of the pandemic, we were shut down in the Bay Area, and our son was back in San Diego going to school, and our youngest was junior in high school, senior in high school.
All remote.
Yeah, but everybody was home for a weekend for some reason. Zeke and our youngest had been up in Tahoe, and they came back, and I was in the bathtub, and I remember Zeke coming in, and for about 10 years we had been kind of dancing around getting divorced. One of us would say, okay, I'm ready, this is done. And the other one would say, no, let's work on it. So for about 10 years we were like back and forth. And there was just like a nasty exchange of texts, and he came in and he goes, I think we're done. And I said, yeah, I think we're done. And that was just kind of how we decided, just like, okay, let's find a way to separate and get divorced. We told the kids at dinner, and the kids were like, it's about time. We know that you haven't been happy. I mean, it was just, we were still, we still on the outside look like the perfect family, but, obviously, we would be out. People probably were totally surprised because it was like Zeke and Terri, they are, they look like the couple. And so that was on a Sunday. Our son went back down to San Diego for school, and I was devastated. And I process things really, really quickly, and I can silver lining anything. But Monday, I mean, I was like devastated. Zeke moved into Adam's room, and we just started talking about what this was going to look like. And I'd be here in the office, and I'd go in and I'd go sobbing to him, and he would just put his arms around me, and I'm like, I just don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know how this is going to work. I mean, I just felt like my whole future was crumbling in terms of what I thought my future was going to be, which was, with Zeke, we were going to grow old together. Maybe we'd have grandkids or not. We don't care. But it was just like, I couldn't imagine him not in my life because he'd been in my life for so long. And you were more stoic about it. Tuesday rolls around and I am like still devastated. Wednesday rolls around and I have never figured something out within that period of time. Thursday rolls around, still devastated. And I go to him, I'm like, who's going to be my emergency contact? And he's like, I'll be your emergency contact. So every day we were actually having dinner together and we were sitting on the couch intentionally together watching something while our youngest was in the bedroom. Friday, I just was like feeling a little bit better. And we had talked about buying another house on the street. We had talked about, ways that we could still remain in each other's lives without disrupting the kids, still continuing to be friends. And Saturday I woke up and it was like the sun was coming out. I drove my car to play tennis. I had some great music on. And I felt like the color came back into me, like I'd been gray for about 10 years. And I was like, I want to have sex. I want to have really good sex. But it's COVID. We're not going to date. So I did some research after playing tennis and found out that it's not unusual for separated couples to have sex. So I said to him after dinner, I said, what do you think about having sex? And he said, is that even a good idea? I'm like, well, I would like to reclaim who I used to be. If I have to get back out there into the world, why don't we it's a safe place. I said, after we watch this, I'm going to go take a bath. I'm going to crawl into bed naked. If you'd like to join me, join me. And so he was tentative at first and he did. And afterwards, it was really fun. There was no baggage. There was no expectation. There were no expectations. There was nothing. We could just be ourselves coming together. It was fun. And I said, tomorrow night? And he goes, okay. And so then every night for, I don't know, a couple months, we did it. And we started introducing, I was listening to Sex with Emily. I was looking for toys. We brought lube into the equation. Why had lube not been part of our equation? Oh my God, magic. And through that, we established vulnerability because you have to be vulnerable when you're trying all of these new things. We started to communicate and we started to date again. We had closed the door on the old relationship. We started working with therapists on our own to establish who we were going to be in the world, and we accidentally rebooted our relationship.
Yeah, and this is what I love about your story so much, because I said before the last break that the way you rebooted your relationship was different than most people. So most people don't decide, let's just keep having sex, and then all of a sudden their relationship gets rebooted, right? If it gets rebooted at all, it's usually let's go to therapy, let's separate for a while until we can, work through our shit or whatever it is, right? So your story is a little bit different, but what it illustrates is the research is really clear on this. Couples who have satisfying and fulfilling sex lives have longer lasting, more successful relationships. The science is clear on that. If you are connecting as a couple sexually in a way that is mutually beneficial, right? Meaning you're not just going through the motions and doing it because he or she wants to, right? You're going to have a longer, more successful relationship. And what I think your story really demonstrates so well is that once you got together, you already decided you're divorced, you're in separate rooms, you're unwinding things. Once you started having sex again in a way that was fun, when you let go, this is another thing you shared, you let go of all the resentment and the baggage. There were no expectations, right? You let go of all that stuff and you just started connecting physically again. And lo and behold, things start to shift. As you also pointed out, you needed to be more open and vulnerable, right? Because you were trying new things, bringing in toys, right? There was no oh, that's weird if we bring this in, or she's going to think that or that, because you're like, well, who cares, right? And you just did it. And it had a massive shift in your relationship. Now, I'm not telling the listeners that simply having sex with your partner is going to change everything. What I am telling you is that if you take the time throughout your relationship to prioritize your relationship and to prioritize your sex life and keep that going throughout the course of your relationship, you most likely will not end up in a place where you've decided to divorce. And I'm also saying that if you are at a rocky point in your life and you sincerely want to turn it around, this is part of that process. How do we reconnect again? How do we learn to communicate again? How do we learn to be open and vulnerable again? Now, you guys just sort of accidentally stumbled into that, but you stumbled into all the right things.
See, we were dumb at 26. We were dumb at 51.
Well, we were lucky is what it was. The only other perspective I'd put on it is that throughout the separation, it was clear to me that I was always going to have a relationship with her. Our particular kids are still being parented. They're still going to need our assistance. They're still going to need us as, a team of some level. And so the marriage became this other thing. It became a third thing. It wasn't part of me or part of her. It was this is our relationship. And so I started looking at it and I read the book. She's talked about 8 different types of marriage or whatever it is.
Yeah, the new I Do.
New I Do. And I was like, oh, okay, so we can just change the relationship. We don't need to change the person. We just need to change our relationship through the type of relationship that we have. And so I still think of ourselves as having been divorced of the old marriage.
Yeah.
And now we have a different marriage that we've put in place that is amazing and still a work in process.
Yeah.
But it was just a different perspective to take on it and put it, the problem is over there. I've got my issues that she can't fix. She has her issues I can't fix. There's this thing that we're both in. We need to change how that works and how that works. And yes, when we started having sex without all those issues, it was a completely different experience. It was a lot of, let's try this, let's try that. I'm curious about this. That didn't work. I've got a cramp. We need to, take a break. We need to reset. Okay, let's try this again.
Yeah. Where did you lose the handcuff keys again? No, I'm just kidding. But it was something that we could work on together that was also very individually satisfying. And we were in it. I love how that was so good. I love how that was because we were working on ourselves and not holding the other person responsible for the other person, but we were coming together. And now we are still that way. I mean, it is by no means perfect. Nope. I mean, we got into an argument last week we're still recovering from. But this time I know that it's something that we will eventually work through, that we have a trust, we have the communication, we will eventually find a way to find the common ground on that. And we have an amazing sex life now.
I like that the way you said that, Zeke, which was that, you feel like the old relationship is gone and it's a whole new one. I think what's wonderful about that is it leaves all of the baggage and resentment and shit from before behind. And that is actually a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do.
We don't know how that happened. I mean, it really is like this door closed. And if we could tell other people how to do that, I mean, we'd be billionaires. But it is magical because I think when we closed the door, we were like, yep, we're getting divorced. And we did not have any intention of doing the work to resurrect it. It was accidental.
There's different ways to get to that. It's a mindset shift is what it is. And there's different ways to get there. That was the way that you got there, which was like, you're like, we're done. Like, this is it. That part is over, right? For other people, they may not be able to get there that way, but they can get there other ways. The point is that it's possible, right? Because the thing is a lot of people get to that point and they think there's no way this can recover. There's way too much baggage. There's way too much resentment. We've done too much damage already, right? Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes that may be the case depending on the kind of damage that was done. But sure. In many cases, it's really a choice. And the choice is to let go of that and start over or hold on to it and then continue to suffer, right? Mm-hmm. And so usually, how it goes. It's like you got to hit rock bottom before you decide, it's time to change something. And that's really where you guys were at. You were at bottom, like, that's it, we're done, right? And that's at the point where you decided to change it. So we're pretty much out of time, but I'm curious because you mentioned that you tried a lot of different things. Of all the things that you did in this sort of accidental reboot, what would you say are like the top 3 things that were most beneficial for you?
I think I already covered it. Be curious, be experimental, try new things without judging yourself or them, and be ready to laugh about it. Because there was some times when we would be doing something and it was like, okay, I don't know what they were talking about, but this isn't working, right? As well as, and this is a nod to and not as a foolproof fix. I used to really enjoy a blowjob. That's not my thing anymore. So it doesn't matter what class she takes. If it doesn't work for me anymore, it's okay.
Really good at it. I would just like to point out.
Absolutely. No, but you know what? I changed. It doesn't. That's not my thing anymore. Okay, so move on. Don't get hung up on what used to work. If you got to move away from it and try something else, then you got to move and go try something else.
So a couple of different things. I think I learned this from Sex with Emily. Foreplay really starts with your last sexual encounter. I think that's really important. Coming in for a lot of us women, a lot of it's in our heads. And if we're disconnected, and then there's this demand on us on top of everything else that's a demand, I'm just like, no, like you don't get, like everybody else has been demanding. I don't feel connected to you. That just doesn't work. So I think that's key. Not feeling threatened by bringing toys into the bedroom, to, whether it's foreplay, whether it's complete play. As we age, our bodies change and how we get to orgasm or how we define pleasure changes. And so being open to that is really important. The other thing is also learning what doesn't work. And I have to share this story because it's really hilarious. So we talked about becoming polyamorous and doing a threesome, but it was in the middle of COVID. And what we realized with that is neither of us really wanted that because it exceeded our risk tolerance, whether it was safety, health, emotional, or whatnot. But it's fun to talk about. So that's still fun fantasy. You don't always have to execute on them. We did go to a sex club in San Francisco once. Oh my God. That was a complete failure. But for all the right reasons, it was hilarious. We got a hotel room in San Francisco. We didn't know what to wear. We kind of got dressed up, walked, because I'm like, we had no idea what to expect. So we go over, we get in line. It was really nice to see diversity in terms of color people's skins, ages, bodies. That was very reassuring as an aging woman. And we get in, we start walking around, and it's a janky place. It is not a nice place. If we're going to do that, it's got to be super high end. What really killed it is we're walking around, as we see this older guy walking around with white socks and tennis shoes, carrying his clothes, and he was butt-ass naked walking around. And first of all, it was just gross to me. And I was like, I am not sitting on anything that his bare ass has sat on. And so we made our loop. I mean, the voyeurism was a little bit fun, but I think it was still early in the night, and we left, and I think we went back and had fun sex on our own, or we did the next morning because I think it was late, but it was like, yeah, that's not our scene. So I think with the experimentation, also realizing that, you don't have to do it all. You can find the things that work for you, keep experimenting, but not everything has to be.
Fantasy is very powerful.
Yeah.
And lube.
Yeah, well, a couple of things you shared there. This is one that is hard for a lot of men to understand, but women will have fantasies and the men think, okay, I can make that happen. Like, we hear you have a fantasy, I'm going to make it happen, right? Because a lot of men just don't realize that women don't actually want every fantasy to come to fruition. For instance, one of the top fantasies for all women is a rape fantasy. Statistics show, they've done research on this. It's one of the top fantasies that women have. But do women actually want to be raped? Of course not. It's a fantasy and it should stay in fantasy land. So that's a total aside. But I love all the things that you both shared about what you did and what worked and what didn't work. I love that idea of staying open, being curious, being able to try new things, laughing about it when they don't work. Oh, by the way, you mentioned, we talked about doing the threesome, and doing that. That is another one that comes up very frequently for couples when they're struggling in the bedroom or in the relationship. They think, well, my needs aren't getting met, so maybe if we bring in a third person and I get my needs met, it'll all just work out. It's about the same as we're on the verge of divorce, so let's have a kid, right? It's about the same as that. It never works. It always complicates things and makes it worse. I always tell people all the time, if you want to do that, you have to start from being in a really stable, strong relationship, because it's going to challenge you. So don't ever think that's a fix for any of this.
Yeah, we weren't up to that challenge.
I love your story though. I've been to quite a few sex clubs myself, and I've seen a lot of what you are talking about. And I've been through a similar experience. I've told this story on the show before too. The first time I ever went to a sex club, it was with my girlfriend, and I think I was roughly 27-ish or so. So I was pretty young. And we both were like, okay, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. And you had to make reservations to go to this one. So we made reservations. We showed up. We're sitting in the parking lot. Turn the car off, and I'm noticing nobody's getting out of the car. And all of a sudden I look at her, I'm like, you sure you want to go in? She looks at me and she's like, I don't know. You sure you want to go in? And we just sat there for a few minutes looking at each other, and we're like, let's get out of here. And we took off. We never even went in. We did eventually go back, which is, we saw a lot of exactly what you were just sharing there. But I think that's again very common and very normal, and a lot of people go through something very similar to that.
Have you wanted to go back again and go?
I've been many times since then. I've had much different experiences than that, but as you were rightly pointing out, you have to choose your place wisely. You have to manage your expectations properly. You have to be really, really solid with your partner. And yeah, but that's a whole other show.
Well, now we just travel around the world and we just have sex in all sorts of different places, hotel rooms, Airbnbs, home exchanges. And we just changed the locale.
Yeah. My current partner. So I most of my listeners know, obviously I was married. My wife passed away. I've been in a new relationship since then. And that is actually sort of the fantasy of my current partner. She says she wants to travel the world and be bent over every balcony. So we're working on that.
I can relate.
All right. I know you guys have a new business, and it's part of the reason why you're out here talking to me. Please tell everybody where they can find out. Well, tell them what your business is and how they can get in touch with you.
Well, we are very, very different people. I don't know, maybe that doesn't come across, but we are incredibly different people. And in fact, during one of the therapy sessions that we went through with someone, the gal said, I can't believe you two were together. You're so incredibly different. We're like, that is not very helpful to us, and you're fired. So anyway, one of the things that common interest of ours, besides our kids and the fact that we've known each other forever, is we love to travel, and we love to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones, which we describe as adventure. So in a very weak moment, I convinced Zeke about 2 years ago to launch Zeke Terri Adventures, where we want to inspire other midlifers, people over the age of 50, to get out, get uncomfortable, and go adventure. However you describe or define adventure, because Zeke's type of adventure is different from my type of adventure, but we try to find some commonality. So if you go to zekeandterri.com, you can see all of our social media stuff, whether it's blog posts, postcards from the road, travel bingo cards. We also have a YouTube channel. Zeke just finished a 2-week cycling trip from Munich to Venice, while I did 2 weeks alone in Strasbourg, France, working on my French, exploring on my own. As an identical twin, I shared a womb with someone, so doing stuff solo is a little bit hard. Zeke's an only child, so that's always just an interesting thing for us to navigate. So our YouTube channel is Zeke Terri Adventures. We're on Instagram as Zeke Terri Adventures. TikTok. We're everywhere. And then I wrote a book to inspire women over the age of 40 to design and live a life of her own creation, called Piloting Your Life. I'm a commercially rated helicopter pilot, so all of my branding is around aviation. So if you're a woman over 40 wondering what is going on and you want to define what's next, you can check out Piloting Your Life.
Awesome. I definitely would not have said to you what your therapist said, but part of the reason why I wanted you guys to tell your story is because from the moment I first spoke to you, I could tell you were very different people. And what makes that interesting in a sense is that you found ways to make it work, right? And so too many times I see, oh, we're just too different. We're just too different. People just give up, right? So that's part of your inspiring story, is that despite your differences and all the challenges, you still found a way to make it work. So, all right, Zeke, Terri, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having us.
It's been a wild ride.
All right, everybody, that's all the time I have for this episode, and I will see you next week. I hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with your friends. And for more free exclusive content, join me in the Passion Vault at kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. That's kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. Thanks for listening. And remember, as Celine used to say, you're amazing.